The Americans have always been opportunists, and it's the land of opportunity, is what the Americans always claim. And they are also one of the biggest, I'm not one of, they are the biggest opportunists as far as the world is concerned. So, does that mean that this is something that is going to continue for a long time? No, because we are a far integrated world today, and you can't just keep looking within. Of course, countries around the world are changing their strategies. We are seeing several trade deals, as far as India and US are concerned, the ties are far more deeper, far more stronger, and it's not going to be limited just to this, because the United States, whether it likes it or not, needs India, because we are the only ones who can at least look at China eye to eye in the region. There is nobody else that can look at China eye to eye in the region. The World Trade Organization, of course, has clearly proven that it has no teeth to bite with, right? So that's something that we've noticed, and it's clearly come to the fore now. Many experts and many strategists, many analysts in the past have been talking about this, and no one really took it seriously. But now we finally know that when this particular eventuality is staring us in the face, and we are going through this eventuality, that the WTO has not been able to do what it's supposed to do.
Hello, folks. Welcome to NEF Charcha. Here is what we discuss policy. Policy, as in, we do not limit it to some of the other vertical. We talk about defense, geopolitics, socioeconomic, and whatnot. So stay tuned. So in our introductory episode, we have with us Mr. Frank Rausan Pereira, who need any kind of introduction, but since it is my work, so I'll be doing it. So sir basically is a senior journalist, an IR expert, as well as sir has also shaped a lot of policy makers. So welcome, sir. Welcome to NEF Charcha. And we are looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shant. Even I'm looking forward to it. It's a real pleasure being with you here. And I'm grateful and honored that I am going to be interviewed as the inaugural guest of NEF Charcha. And it's really a pleasure to be here. And I wish you the very best. And I wish you all success going into the future as well. So great. May Ishvara bless you, and may you be successful in all your endeavors.
Thank you, sir. Without further ado, I'd like to start with my first question. So since we are discussing on the India-US trade tariffs and how it will affect the relations, so I'll be starting with my first question. Sir, do you think that escalating trade tariffs from USA mark a return to the protectionist policy? When it comes to US, it has always stood for free market, and there have been a lot of countries who have actually practiced protectionist policy. India has also its policy is, you can say, quasi protectionist. But when it comes to US, the recent trade tariffs have actually marked a concern that we are again shifting back to protectionism. And how do you think that India should recalibrate its export oriented sector to respond to such tariffs?
Interesting question. Well, let's first remove the word protectionist and say that the Americans have always been opportunists, and it's the land of opportunity, is what the Americans always claim. And they are also one of the biggest, they are the biggest opportunists as far as the world is concerned. So right now, protectionism suits them, and hence they are looking at protectionism. Why does it suit them? Because of what China has been doing over the last couple of decades. Now, the United States has very clearly understood that the biggest challenge that it faces is from China. It faces challenges from China across multiplicity of sectors, and this has a cascading effect on what the Americans do. So they are trying to use this as a moment, because China is the global leader when it comes to providing for the world. So that's something that they want to put an end to. They want to have a dent on the Chinese economy, and hence they have become more and more protectionist. But does that mean that this is something that is going to continue for a long time? No, because we are a far integrated world today, and you can't just keep looking within. Of course, countries around the world are changing their strategies. We're seeing several trade deals, whether it's an FDA or a comprehensive economic partnership or whatever you want to call it, have been taking place between nations, between blocs as well. So this is one way of offsetting it. And as far as India's exports are concerned, India has not been a great exporter, and that has been one of our major challenges over the years. But I think a few good steps have been taken in the recent past, and we are seeing it bear fruits. One of the latest or the most successful schemes in the recent past has been the PLI scheme, and we are now looking at PLI 2.0 as well. PLI has been extremely successful. We are doing far better than what we were doing in the past. Even 5 years ago, we were not where we are today with regards to exports. So that's a great step that we have taken in the right direction. So this is how I would like to sum up, the first question, and try to I've tried to cover almost every aspect in this particular, in my opening remarks.
Yes, as you rightly mentioned, that we have not been a very export oriented country, but we strive to be once. And you rightly mentioned about the PLI scheme and PLI 2.0 coming. So, my second question to you would be that how has India's trade policy evolved in response to US tariff escalations? Has India also reciprocated to US with tariff putting tariffs on the trade? Or is it suggesting a broader shift to India's economic diplomacy?
It is definitely a broader shift as far as India's economic diplomacy is concerned. Let's get one thing straight, right? Indians are adept when it comes to diplomacy. We are fantastic when it comes to how we handle difficult situations around the world. We know how to do the tight rope balancing act, and this is something that we've been good at right from the beginning, right? And even now we are seeing India go on that trajectory, and diplomacy is something that we are very sharp at, we are very good at, and it has always helped us in the most difficult of times. Now, as far as an economic shift is concerned, we have one thing that I like that I've seen of late is that we've become nimble-footed and agile. We are not rigid and we are not firm on any one aspect, and we are willing to make those small moves to ensure that we get the best out of any possible situation. So right now we are looking at working on smaller deals with the rest of the world. We are in talks with the EU. We are in talks with the smaller blocks or smaller regions within the EU itself to try and get the best out of what the situation can offer at the moment. So that's how we've been nimble footed. Of course, we've not been able to sign those mega deals, be it with Europe, be it with the United States or any of the major trading blocks that we have. But we've had tremendous inroads with regards to Australia, with regards to Japan, with regards to the UAE. These are also major trading partners as far as India is concerned. So we've been able to get inroads there as well. We have an ECTA with Australia. We are also that has been doing wonderfully well for more than a couple of years now, and we're trying to get an even better and a more comprehensive deal with Australia. With the UAE, we have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, so that is also going very well. Right now, the focus is on United States and Europe, not because of anything else, because even Europe has changed its tactics. All this while over the last 3 or 4 decades, ever since the end of the World War, Europe has been riding piggyback on the US. Now, finally, with the kind of policies that President Trump has come forward with, it seems like Europe has to fight their own battle, or at least try to be a part of the bigger pie and do something in regards. So Europe, which was slowly going into the shadows as far as a pole in the globe is concerned, now is fighting to be another pole, which is very good, really, as far as the globe is concerned. So you're going to be seeing a Europe which is far more engaged and entrenched in the entire situation. So this has been a positive spin off of what President Trump has done with his tariffs and his tariff barriers, etc. So all of these equations are changing as well, and it remains to be seen how we switch across any of these situations in in the time to come.
Thank you, sir. Actually, it explains a lot about how the trade across the globe is changing, how actually the geopolitical scenario is shifting. Before, we could only see that, as you rightly mentioned, that Europe was totally becoming dependent on US. But recently, the actions by France and a lot of other European nations have proved that you need to come out of that over dependence on a country which is in some other continent and which dictates terms to you. Right. So, sir, from that, as you rightly mentioned about European Union and trade with its trade with India. So, how do you think that since India, before these trade tariffs were actually put in place, India was going close to US, and we have already we have seen op-eds coming, and we have seen people talking about India going close to US to balance China. But how do you see the recent friction after the trade tariffs would affect its relation with China, European Union, and the US? And how do you think that India is going to play that balance?
Like I mentioned earlier, India has been very good at playing the balancing act. We have done so very well. We were one of those very few countries that still had a relationship with Iran despite all the sanctions that the United States had imposed on Iran. Of course, we stopped importing oil because that was a no. That was we had to give. There had to be a little bit of give and take. But our operations within Chabahar continued. Our relationship with the Iranians continued. There were high level visits from Iran to India. Even during the Iran-Israel conflict, we were one of those few countries that was in a position to speak to both of them. It's a different matter that we didn't impose our will and try to mediate, because that is not our style, and that is not the way we would like to function as well. Because if we decide to mediate and go in and throw our hat in for mediation, then someone like a Trump, who's always waiting to try and mediate and get involved in every possible conflict around the world to try and be the peacemaker, would have definitely intervened with India and Pakistan, and that's something that we don't want. And we do not want any nation to be pointed in that direction as well, and especially an over enthused American administration at this point in time trying to diffuse any situation around the world, because there is one agenda as far as President Trump is concerned, and it is a very, very clear agenda. He is looking for the Nobel Peace Prize. He has, of course, that is his big takeaway. And we've seen leaders around the world sing that tune as well. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already said that President Trump is fighting for peace, so he deserves the Nobel. African Union leaders were recently, met President Trump, and even they sang this tune about, how probably President Trump needs to get the Nobel Prize. Now, I don't blame the leaders of the African Union, because they are in a difficult situation and they clearly know it was a smart move. They know that this is a person who's looking forward to receiving the Nobel. So let's at least speak about it and try to keep him happy, so that there is no other repercussion for us to deal with. Because President Trump's policies has already looked into the deportation of Africans who are in the United States. So that is something that that the African Union is concerned about as well. So they're talking about, give the person what he wants, let him hear more of it, and at least let us be kept at an arm's distance. So this is as far as the evolving geopolitical situation with regards to what's happening around the world is concerned. Now, coming specifically to India and the United States. Now, India and the United States relationship goes far beyond just a political relationship with the head of state, right? India has very strong ties with people across party lines, with people across sectors in the United States. There's a strong Indian diaspora which is contributing heavily to what India wants to do there, and portraying India's ideas. So it is a flashpoint, or it is an irritant with regards to India US ties at the moment. But I think both countries know that there is no hard or a hard red line in which they have to work, because the 90 days moratorium period was given by President Trump, and he said that after that the tariffs will come into place, but that actually hasn't happened. The negotiations continue to take place. There is a little bit of elbow room, and we know, looking at President Trump in his first term and even a little bit of his second term, we know his style of functioning. He's someone who goes all out in the beginning, but is willing to take a step back, because at the end of the day, he's the president of the United States, and he's not a foolish man. So he knows what he is doing and what needs to be done. He's got his advisors. It's a nation that is at the end of the day still one of the most powerful country in the world. So there is a little bit of sense of responsibility somewhere in the background, and that is why we are not seeing an all-out tariff war, so to speak. The agenda is very clear. China is always going to be the central in the theme, and China is going to be at the back of everyone's mind, especially with the United States in place there. But as far as India and US are concerned, the ties are far more deeper, far more stronger, and it's not going to be limited just to this because the United States, whether it likes it or not, needs India because we are the only ones who can at least look at China eye to eye in the region. There is nobody else that can look at China eye to eye in the region. So, at some level, the United States needs India if it has to deal with China, especially in this part of the Indo Pacific.
As you mentioned about the trade negotiations currently going on between US and India, and even after 90 days, the trade tariffs have not been reimposed. So let's assume a hypothetical situation that if the trade tariffs come and we are unable to get into a deal with US, which are the sectors that you think would be affected the most?
Well, there are a few sectors that are likely to get affected. One is, of course, steel, which is already being affected as a result of what's happening. There are other sectors like, there's a lot of talk that is taking place with regards to dairy, etc. So that is another sector that is likely to be hit. But I don't see it being hit to such an extent because, the US also at the end of the day needs Indian services. They're going to be only sectors in which it's going to have an impact, definitely, but a minimal impact and not a large scale impact because nothing has been said about services really. And that is our biggest, if you look at India's export pie chart, services comprises the biggest share of the pie as far as the United States is concerned. There's not much that is taking place there, so that is going to continue to take place. As far as the other major sectors are concerned, they're not going to be that hit because you look at the entire world. One of the big things that big ticket ideas or the big ticket deals that the United States want to reach with India is more defense procurement. Now, defense procurement is such an area that has a lot of money involved. There's a big ticket size basically. So that's an area. But then India is at the end of the day, India needs to look out for its own interests as well. And I really commend the Indian government for the way it has dealt with this entire situation because we are clear as far as American F-35 jets or whatever it else is concerned that we are not going to close our eyes and just buy those jets because we need to look at what works for us from a financial perspective, what works for us from a strategic perspective and an operational perspective. And if your companies are not willing to give us any kind of technology transfer or not willing to give us any kind of support in terms of dealing with this equipment fully, then there is no point really taking any of this equipment. So we have very subtly conveyed across to the other side that okay, we are looking into it. We're just buying our time. At the end of the day, I think let's make it clear. Of course, no one within the Indian establishment has said this, but I'm putting my neck on the line and saying that we have 3 more years of President Trump, so this storm too shall pass. And the American system is such that you can't have another term. So you are two terms, and then that's it as far as you are concerned. So this is a phase really that we are going through as far as US policies are concerned, and these policies will clearly change, and there's going to be a new definition when 3 years later. So we are trying to buy our time. We are trying to try and ensure that we prolong the sticky situation and sticky issues as much as possible because we know that there is an expiry date on all of this. And then once that expiry date is reached, there are new avenues, new dimensions that we can look at.
As these all trade dynamics are playing on and everyday news are being made, so one thing I see in the news that is missing is the role of international organizations like the world trade organizations. So how do you think how effective they have been in managing this current scenario? Because I do not see them mediating or coming forward and speaking against what is being done by the US in terms of global competitiveness, global trade competitiveness, because it has always portrayed itself as someone who stands for free trade. So how do you see it, the international organizations working, sir?
So the World Trade Organization, of course, has clearly proven that it has no teeth to bite with, right? So that's something that we've noticed, and it's clearly come to the fore now. many experts and many strategists, many analysts in the past have been talking about this, and no one really took it seriously. But now we finally know that when this particular eventuality is staring us in the face, and we are going through this eventuality, that the WTO has not been able to do what it's supposed to do. Now, let's not forget, it's not a dead organization. At the end of the day, it has a role to play. But when your biggest backer decides to pull the plug and decides not to go with you, there is little that you can do. So as far as the organization itself is concerned, it's in a phase where it is lying low. It is braving the storm, so to speak. And clearly, I see things changing as far as the WTO is concerned. Of course, the two biggest economies in the world, China and the United States, don't care two hoots at the moment as far as the WTO is concerned. So there's nothing much that the WTO can do, or anybody else for that matter can do. But things are changing with regards to trade organizations, or how trade works. You look at the European Union led by France and Germany, especially, they're looking at trying to set up or bring in place some kind of another trade bloc which looks into these issues, which looks specifically into how to deal with more challenges with regards to trade. And it remains to be seen how that shapes up. Like I said, it's an interesting scenario. You have a, a pole in the world, like I mentioned earlier, which has been dormant, which has been really dormant and just riding the wave. If you have the WTO, which is braving the storm, you have a dormant European Union riding the wave, right? But now it has to become a lot more proactive. And that brings about a lot of opportunities for the rest of the world. It also opens up market space. It also gets world leaders thinking about problems from around the world. So far, the Americans would do all the thinking, and the European Union would be on board with the Americans, along with the UK, along with Israel, etc. And there was nothing else beyond that taking place. Now you have multiple groups, multiple blocks, putting their best minds together to try and bring about some kind of a solution to the problem. Right now, if you look at how things are, there is a huge vacuum with regards to global leadership. When I say global leadership, what I mean is, who's taking on the role of trying to put an end to wars, or to try and look at climate change as a problem, or to try and look at some of the biggest challenges that the globe is facing today. G7 has not been able to do that. G7, and if G7 can't do it, then who will? So that's the whole idea. You look at Iran, Israel, the conflict that they had. You look at whole of West Asia, it's in turmoil. Russia, Ukraine has been going on for so long now. Africa is dealing with its own set of problems, with communal violence, with ethnic violence, and with religious violence as well. But who's talking about this? Who is trying to bring an end, or trying to bring about some kind of a solution as far as this is concerned? That is the biggest problem. And the G7 has been missing in action with regards to dealing with the biggest challenges and problems. President Trump has only been talking about it from with one agenda in mind, of the Nobel Peace Prize. And so you really need world leaders and groups and others to take true leadership. The world is looking and screaming for leadership at this point in time. So it's an opportune moment for world leaders to come together and try and discuss and deal with the real world problems that we have of today.
Like you rightly mentioned, that one organization is becoming defunct, but at the same time, a dormant organization is again rising. As you rightly mentioned, that EU is rising, EU is on the rise. So, on that note, sir, I'd like to shift a little bit. When it comes to current US trade, as you mentioned, opportunist policy, it has threatened a lot of businesses, especially brands like Apple, that if you don't make in the US, then you are right, then you will not be able to sustain in the US. So how do you think that India can learn from these kind of sanctions, and how do you think that India can attract these companies to India to make in India? And a lot of countries before also have faced a lot of sanctions, like Vietnam or Brazil. So how do you think that India is going to learn from these countries, and how do you think that India is going to attract the businesses which are being threatened by the US?
Well, it's simple, right? If you want businesses, if you want companies to come to India, just ensure that you have a better ease of doing business in place. We are also looking like PLI 2.0. We are also looking at EODB, that is ease of doing business 2.0. And several steps and several strides have been taken in this direction to try and ensure that businesses can function in a better manner here. Now, for that, you need a holistic approach. You need everything else to come together as one. You need last mile connectivity. You need land, you need water, you need space, you need everything to come together as one. And who's going to provide for this? You need better infrastructure for sure. That is one of the biggest aspects or biggest components of ease of doing business. Now you provide all of this. Thankfully, as far as Samsung is concerned, they've got a great center set up in the national capital region. I think Noida has done very well in that sense to try and attract more businesses to the area, to try and give them not just incentives but to give them space and to give them an opportunity to grow in the right way. Now we need to sort that out. We are trying to get fabrication units and whatnot in place, but without the right kind of infrastructure, it's difficult to expect foreign companies to come and invest, come and set up shop here in India as well. Now you look at the monsoons and you look at a city like Gurgaon, where there are so many multinational companies that are located there. The roads are flooded. You look at Bangalore, a city which is the silicon capital of the country. The roads are flooded whenever it rains. So how do you expect businesses to set up and continue to function if you have such poor infrastructure? So see, these areas and these elements will have to be looked at and worked out first. That is one. Second, of course, the Apple issue is an interesting one. Now, it's as at the end of the day, Apple is a company, is a business which is running for profit. They will look at where their profits lie, and they will only take that decision. Now, clearly, no matter how much of a tariff that President Trump threatens them with, they are going to look at their investors, they are going to look at their stakeholders and see whether or not they are going to get a profit out of it or not. If it is, and it is more profitable for them to be in India, then they will function out of India. And at the end of the day, like I said, China is the biggest challenge as far as the US is concerned. If China is kept at bay to an extent with Apple manufacturing out of India, I don't see this going beyond a threat as such. At the end of the day, there's going to be some leeway for Apple as well. And the people at Apple also know this because they will be forced to go back into China otherwise, which the US, Apple, India, and the rest of the world doesn't want at the moment. We have clearly decided after the COVID-19 pandemic that we need to have multiple centers of creation and we need to have a supply chain that is sustainable in the long run. You have the rare earth mineral problem that is taking place with China already. Quad has decided to set up the rare earth mineral initiative. Of course, it is just an announcement. It is going to take a long time for it to actually fructify, but at least they are thinking on those lines. So clearly, they are looking at shifting away from China. And these are aspects and these are situations that will really help India.
I think we had a lot more to discuss, but we are running short of time. So I'll be asking my last question, sir. So, how do you think that India can leverage its geopolitical value to negotiate a deal with US without compromising its strategic autonomy? Because US, wherever it sees it wants a partner, it always sees its profit at the first hand. So, how do you think that India is going to tread that path?
I think India has been very clear, and that's why the negotiations have been going on for so long as well. And President Trump himself has mentioned about it, how India is pushing back on certain areas. Spoken about how Prime Minister Modi, he has appreciated Prime Minister Modi for being a tough negotiator, a seasoned negotiator, and someone who knows the art or craft of diplomacy as well. And this is something that the Prime Minister has gained with years and years of political experience, right? From, being the chief minister in Gujarat to then transitioning into the prime minister of India as well. So all those years of experience has made him a tough negotiator and someone who clearly understands what goes into this whole issue. So India has been very clear with the United States that for us, strategic autonomy is everything. We will not do anything that hinges or hinders any of not see, national security is another thing, of course. National security is of utmost importance, but anything that is going to be is not going to be in the interest of India is a deal that we are not going to take, and this is something that we have been very clear about. So strategic autonomy is the mantra at the moment, and that is something that the foreign minister and everybody else has been talking about as well, and we are pushing forward with every nation, with every grouping, and with every alliance, so to speak. So I think we can all rest assured that there is not going to be a situation where is going to be caused to India with regards to some kind of a deal that is being worked out. Whatever happens is going to be in India's best interest. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the program itself, India is a master at diplomacy and dealing with such situations. So I think the diplomatic approach is the best approach, and our diplomacy is going to trump everything else in at the end of the day. So these are aspects that are best left to the diplomats. And like I also mentioned, the trade talks have been going on this long because there are these negotiations that are taking place. There is going to be a little bit of give and take, and both parties are looking for their own best interests. So tough negotiations are are ongoing, and I expect something to happen sometime in the near future, and some kind of a deal to be in place very soon, which will not hinder our progress too much.
Thank you, sir. With that, I think it's a wrap on the first episode of NEF Charcha. We have we think that we'll be seeing you again and again, discussing with us and sharing your insights on different policy aspects. So with that, it comes to an end. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Nishant. It was a real pleasure to share my views on this very interesting subject and very tough questions as well that you posed. And I hope I've done justice with regards to this particular topic that we covered. Of course, I meandered a bit away from the core subject of India-US tariff, but that was important to do because it was important to put into perspective how the globe is positioned at the moment and how we are an integrated world. So even though the globe seems to be protectionist or protectionism seems to be prevailing at the moment, that is not really the case. Internally, we are seeing a lot of intermingling and a lot of globalization happening, not overtly, but undercurrent of globalization is very much there. So I'm glad to have shared that with you and on NEF Charcha. Thank you so much for having me as your inaugural guest. Really happy once again to have shared the space with you and communicated my thoughts on this subject. Looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.